Hey everyone, and welcome to the channel. I thought it'd be fun to compare the 2024 Chieftain to the new redesigned 2024 Street Glide. If you follow my channel, you know I love both brands. I've started riding Harleys about 20 years ago, about 15 years on Harleys, 5.5 years on Indians. Of course, I have another 30 years of riding experience on Japanese brands. I can't believe I've been riding motorcycles for over 50 years. That doesn't seem possible. But I do love both brands. I fell in love with Harley Davidson when I was a kid. I didn't fall in love with Indian until the year 2000. But I love both brands. I've owned both brands. 6 Harley Davidsons. I've owned 3 Indians. And I think the competition is good. I'm not saying Harley wouldn't have advanced their bikes without Indian. They certainly would have, but they might have done it at a slower pace. Certainly, Harley stepping up their game is going to have to force Indian to step up their game, which is good for us as consumers. I think it's good for our sport. So stay tuned, and I'll tell you what I like and what I don't like about each one of the models. I'll try to give you an unbiased opinion if there is such a thing, but at least I do love both brands. I'm not an out-and-out Harley fanboy. I'm certainly not a Harley hater. I love both and have enjoyed both brands. So stay tuned, and I'll tell you again what I like and what I don't like about the 2024 Indian Chieftain and the 2024 Harley Davidson Street Glide. Let me start with the Indian Chieftain. Certainly, Harley Davidson is king, may always be king, so I thought I would start out with the contender. First, let's look at price. I'm talking the least expensive Chieftain you can purchase versus the least expensive Street Glide. The Chieftain comes in at $23,999. The Harley comes in at $25,999. So we're talking a couple of $1,000 difference. Now, they're both touring bikes. I know we call them baggers, but they're touring bikes. You can do 800 miles in a day. You can travel across country. So a touring bike needs to have navigation. If I bought either one of these, it'd have to have navigation. And you can download navigation onto either one of these models. On the Chieftain, it is an additional $550 to add the navigation. On the Street Glide, it's an additional $350. So that absorbs a little bit of the price savings with the Chieftain, and I don't know why, the Chieftain does not come with engine guards. There are no crash bars. These bikes weigh 800 pounds. Periodically, you're going to let it tip over. Maybe in the garage, in the driveway, in a parking lot. I see it happen all the time. No damage occurs because they ease over on the crash bars. If I bought the Chieftain, I'd have to add crash bars to it, and now you can find some aftermarket ones that are real affordable. But again, that eats up just a little bit of that saving. Still, the Indian is at least $1,500 less expensive for those that budget and price point matter. Now the Indian, the base model comes in black. The Harley, now the base model comes in gray. So let me talk to you about some of the things that I like about the Indian. Let's start with the front forks. The lower tubes on the front forks are chrome. Easy to keep clean, they don't tarnish. I don't know how many Harleys I've bought. Those lower fork tubes, that polished aluminum, sometime within a year they would look horrific. They're terrible. So the fork tubes, the chrome is nice on the base model Chieftain. Moving on up to the fairing, the electric windshield. I was so disappointed when I realized that the Street Glide did not have an electric windshield. I know I've seen YouTubers that say it's a gimmick or you'll just set it in one position and never change it, never use it. Couldn't be further from the truth. I use my electric windshield. When I'm in town, I like to lower it down, especially on a hot summer day. When it's cold, I raise it up. When it's raining, I raise it up. Have another setting I set it at when I'm going down the freeway. If I were to trade my Indian for a Harley Street Glide, and I do have the fever really bad, I would miss that electric windshield tremendously. Let's go to the back of the fairing. The Indian still has analog gauges. Now I know that screen is incredible on the Harley. It's gigantic. It looks good. But all you get is a screen. There's no analog gauges left. So if your screen fails and you're 1,500 miles from home, not only do you lose your navigation, you lose your speedometer, you lose your gas gauge, you lose everything. If my screen goes down on the Indian, I still have analog gauges. So I actually like having some analog gauges. Of course, I'm an old guy. I guess we old guys like it. Probably young folks absolutely love that big screen. But the analog gauges are important for me. I love the huge floorboards on the Chieftain. I can put the ball of my foot on the back of the floorboard. I can put my 11 size boot in the middle of the floorboard. I can put my heel on the front of the floorboard, and that's without highway packs. The floorboards are great. The overall ergonomics, I think, are better with the Indian. Harley, I always felt like I was sitting closer to the tank, kind of up on the tank, kind of a sit up and beg position. Now this new Harley, I've ridden the 24 Street Glide, the seat's been redesigned. I don't feel as cramped on the 24 Street Glide, but still the Indian is just far roomier. Now I'm 6'1", long legs. I really like the room that I have on the Indian. Another thing I love about the Indian is that monoshock. It's an air shock with 4.5 inches of travel. Now I'm thankful Harley went from a 2-inch travel to a 3-inch travel on their rear shocks. Vast improvement over the previous year model. I had a 2019 Street Glide I bought brand new. The rear shocks were horrific because I'll ride 400 miles and eat lunch and ride back in the same day. I like a plush Cadillac ride, and you have that with the Indian. The only other bike I've ever ridden that had the kind of ride comfort that the Indian suspension has is a Goldwing. I'm glad Harley stepped it up some, but I would give the Indian the mark for suspension. Now, what do I not like? I've already mentioned no crash bars. My Indian sometimes can put off a lot of heat. I've always felt like Harley did a better job with heat management. And when you're looking at the base model, well, either one of them, the base model, the cheapest, you have one choice, either black or gray on the Harley. But if you decided to step it up, there's a lot more color options with the Harley. Of course, black is $600. The other colors are $850. If you want the blacked out motor, you're $1,350. Well, then you've put the Street Glide way more expensive than the Chieftain. So those are some of the kind of things I like and I don't like about the Chieftain. As you probably know, the Street Glide got a complete redesign. We're talking a different fender, fairing. They integrated the blinkers into the fairing, which Indian did 10 years ago. Reshaped the gas tank, reshaped the saddlebags, and I think they really did a good job. It gives it a sleek look. Certainly it no longer looks dated, looks very, very modern. And there are some things I do like better about the Street Glide. Of course, one thing I've already mentioned is the screen. The screen is really incredible. I mean, I'm nervous about having a screen only, but the screen is very nice. It's gigantic, covers the whole dash. But the big difference, in my opinion, in these two bikes, and if I were to make the switch back to Harley, and I've gone back and forth since 2017, the one thing that might persuade me to make the switch, and I almost did a month ago and I still may, and that is the motor. You're talking a 117 cubic inch motor over a 111 with considerable more power. The Chieftain has 119 foot-pounds of torque. Now these claim torque numbers at the crank, not the rear wheel. But the Indian has 119 foot-pounds of torque. This Harley comes in at 130 foot-pounds of torque. You're talking 11 more foot-pounds of torque. Indian doesn't publish horsepower numbers on the Chieftain, but I think it's around 97. The Harley's now publishing horsepower numbers. It's 105 for this base model. So you get considerable more power from the Harley Davidson. Now I suspect Indian's going to step up their game, probably the 2025 models. They'll come out with some bikes probably with a little more power because Indian had kind of been winning the torque wars for the last 10 years or so, especially on their base models. But Harley, I mean, they really stepped it up with the performance. Another great thing about Harley-Davidson is the dealer network. But that's getting a lot closer. From where I live in North Carolina, I have 2 Indian dealerships within a 60 miles from where I live. In that same radius, there are 5 Harley-Davidson dealerships, which I think is a little oversaturation. I think they could have gotten by with maybe 3 in that geographic area, but 5 is a little extreme because some of them are pretty close together. But you do have a great dealer network. Aftermarket is better with Harley-Davidson now. It's getting much better with Indian, but the OEM accessories for the Indian are already way more expensive than the Harley. So then the aftermarket ones, even though they're half the price of the OEM, they're still more expensive than the Harley-Davidson aftermarket products. But again, they're coming down. So these bikes I think are very close. The Harley looks sleeker. I think the Indian looks bolder. Just the fairing, the lines, I felt like I got better wind protection from the Chieftain than I did the Street Glide. It seemed like they trimmed down that fairing just a little bit more. Maybe the windshield too. You know, they come with the short windshield. I don't think you can go wrong with either one. I love both. I'd love to have both of them sitting in the garage, but that's just not practical for me at this time, and I may make the switch back, and if I do, primarily it's going to be that motor. I really am impressed with that Milwaukee 8 117. I mean, the 107 I had in my 2019 Street Glide was a great motor. As far as I know, both these motors are bulletproof. I've seen people with 100,000 miles on that Milwaukee 8 still riding them across the country. I've got over 60,000 miles on my Indian motor, my Thunderstroke 111. It still runs like brand new. So these are great bikes. Now some of you folks are like I was for a long time. You'd only buy a Harley-Davidson, and I get it. They're American made. They're iconic. They're rich history. You just go on and on. The dealer network, and I can understand why anyone would buy a Harley-Davidson. And then there are some people that are Harley haters, and I really don't get that. That makes no sense to me because they make great motorcycles. But if you would want a second bike or consider something different, I mean, the Indian is a great option, especially for those that don't care for Harley-Davidson. I mean, they make great motorcycles. They too are American-made, very iconic, more of a storied past. They don't have, I mean, they started before Harley, but they had huge gaps where there were no Indians at all. So, you know, buy what you like. I think, again, you'll be happy with either one. And remember, if you like to ride, ride as much as you can, because one day we're all going to be too old to ride. Be sure and like and subscribe, comment down below. I'd like to know which of these 2 bikes you like better and why. What do you like and dislike about each one? And thanks for joining in. I forgot to mention, now the Harley has liquid cooled heads. They do a great job hiding the radiator. They do have a goofy reservoir hanging off one side of the frame that's not very attractive. But overall, they did a good job with that aspect. I have to also help with heat management. Now, one of the criticisms of the Indian, people said it looks plasticky, especially the dash, the fairing. And now the Harley also looks plasticky.